Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
So much of what we talk about on this podcast, part of being self-smarter is being conscious of when you're not open-minded and surrounding yourself with people who can kind of give you that gentle tap of, well, maybe you should think about things in a different light.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan and this is my friend and co-host Danelle.
Hello and welcome back, Meg. We missed you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I appreciate you saying that. I heard you in the last 2 episodes. You're like, I wish Megan were here right now. It's not as easy as it looks.
No, and for our listeners, just a little background. Meg preps these episodes. She puts a lot of effort into it, and I kind of show up almost like in princess mode and just do some talking. And so when I had to lead 3 episodes in a row with our wonderful guests, and if you haven't listened to those episodes, please go back and listen to them because of what they had to say, but not because of my hosting capabilities. So I missed you greatly. I think I messed up every opening, closing, and skipped a few commercials. So David had to work some magic too. So I'm very grateful for all the folks that make this podcast come together. That would be, of course, you and David and his crew and Jordan and Jesse who make it all wonderful, because when I'm in at the helm, it's a little bit harder than I imagine.
I loved it. The episode, one of the episodes at the beginning, you forget to go to commercial. Like, I'm just going to call it out because I'm driving down the street, listening to it on a Monday morning and crying laughing. Like, I had to pull over because you're like, well, let's talk about, and then David cuts to commercial. Like, it's like, and then my voice inserts itself. Hi, and then websites. It was so funny. I was like, this is fantastic. You know what, guys? Thank you for joining the ride, the let's do a podcast ride and let's see how it goes. Thank you for sticking around.
We've been very proud of trying to not strive for perfection, and boy,
it's working.
The episodes that I was leading was exactly a testament to how imperfection is what we're trying to accomplish here. So. And connection. Yes. Imperfection and connection.
That's right. And that's really, the connection is the most important part, which brings me to our topic for today, which is open-mindedness. So I would say we've had a lot of open-mindedness, as have our listeners, quite frankly, relative to our podcast. But my first question to you is, just before we dive in, is, are you closed-minded about anything? I think we both think we're pretty open-minded, first of all.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think open-mindedness, if you're thinking about yourself, I mean, it's really relative to who else you're comparing yourself to, right? So am I more open-minded than you? No, because I think we're fairly aligned on certain things. Relative to other people, I would find myself extremely open-minded. And then there's some cases where I can see where I need to really be more conscious about being open-minded about certain things. And I will tell you, this move to New York, it's forced me in many ways I have found myself in positions of needing to be more open-minded. So this is just being here has been an incredible exercise. And especially at 50 years old, there's a lot of things that I'm still learning to be open-minded about. And I'm appreciative of that. What am I closed-minded about? I'm pretty closed-minded about Texas Longhorns.
I am too, actually. I shouldn't maybe say that because I think Cooper might want to go there.
As I welcome them, and I know several of my good buddies who listen to this podcast are Longhorns, and while I have respect for your institution, I still have a zest for the rival between A&M and Texas. So I'm closed-minded about Texas Longhorns, and I'm sure I'm closed-minded about other things that you could probably bring up.
Yes, I could, but I'm not going to. Instead, we're going to hop to this quick commercial. Self-Smarter listeners, sometimes I wonder if we're being self-smarter about our businesses. When I see or hear of a business working without a marketing plan, I have literal tears well up in my eyes. Why? Because our clients have a plan in place that puts them in a position to win when they're seeking to engage with their target audiences. Do you have a marketing plan for 2023? If not, you need to call me Stat so we can get your marketing plan in the works. Don't have a lot of money? Well, that's perfect because marketing plans are on the lower end of our project pricing and have the most amazing outcome. Get yours moving now. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Danelle.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of closed-mindedness, I do want to say I think I am a little closed-minded about, and Aaron would say this if he were here. He'd be like, you definitely are closed-minded about wanting to talk about things going on in the world.
Aaron, your husband.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I know we have a lot of new listeners because our guests have brought in a much broader audience. So just let's help each other out when we
names and
make references.
Proper nouns need a description and explanation. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't like talking about politics with people who can't emotionally handle it. Like if they get upset, I'm just like, I'm out.
But you're not closed-minded about politics
I'm
or
closed-minded
discussing
about their behavior.
Right. When they have a solid stance and can't even hear you or open their minds to your perspective or others.
Yeah, it's actually
That's
ironic.
what you're closed-minded about.
Yes, I'm closed-minded about closed-minded people. That is an interesting twist there that I just realized. Yeah. But I'm going to work on that. I'm working on that, especially as we approach the holidays, which are right here in our lap. And so anyway, I just wanted to say that out loud because that is beef that I have a lot at home and in my family because we're polarized. So we can talk about politics on another episode, which I don't think anybody wants to talk about.
Well, I'll be absent that day, but go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I'm coming with you, actually. Someone else can talk about it. But I think that you living in New York brought up this notion of being open-minded. And you brought it up to me, I think the last time I was in New York, you're like, you know what I really want to talk about? I want to talk about the benefits or the power of keeping an open mind. And so tell me why you wanted to talk about this topic.
You know, I think it's a number of things.
Okay.
I've been coming to New York for, 25 plus years, but it's always been in the mode of a trip, an experience. And it became more so when Mackie Payton obviously came to school here. Now I was visiting a loved one. And so, my child. And so, but I never really was here long enough to absorb the diversity and I mean diversity on every level. And I'm not saying that, Texas or all the, where my home is and all the places I've traveled around the world, I've been exposed to diversity. There's no doubt about it. But when you live somewhere that's so drastically different than where you have been living, and in so many ways, I felt like I had work to do. I felt like I had some conscious observation for myself that I could see that I needed to have a more open mind. And I mean, I can give you many examples of that, but let's just take environment. There's things that I'm found myself kind of being a little bit closed-minded about. Like, for instance, New York's not the cleanest city in the world. I'm used to manicured lawns and clean streets, and I'm just accustomed to different things. And so having to open my mind as to why things are, and especially as I continue to have guests and people that come to the city to visit, whether they're there on business or come to see me, I find myself having that same opinion. And now I'm able to help them understand why things are the way they are. And so if the city itself can present closed-mindedness to some degree, so can the people that live here. And, I walk down the street and I hear 10 different languages in a matter of 2 avenues. And so it has opened me up in so many ways. And then culturally in the arts and what people find interest in arts. Of course, I love musical theater. Of course, I love music. That's clearly, if you're a listener of one time listening to our podcast or the whole, more than that, you understand how much music plays a role in both of our lives. but I'm being exposed to even more, things that are really outside of my comfort zone. And I want to be someone who's open-minded. And I think what I'm learning is it's like so much of what we talk about on this podcast. Part of being self-smarter is being conscious of when you're not open-minded and surrounding yourself with people who can kind of give you that gentle tap of, well, maybe you should think about things in a different light. And so anyway, I think that's really where this came from, is just I immediately showing up here found myself needing to be more open-minded. And again, walking into this city, I would have told you I find myself to be a fairly open-minded person, and I had things to work on. So that's why I wanted to talk about it.
Love it. Okay. So I see this happening in you.
Okay.
I literally see this happen.
I'm working on it.
That's a good thing. When I come visit you, I think I'm headed to see you in a week. This will be my 4th time. Every time I come see you, of course, I talk to you all the time, but I feel this happening is in terms of evolution for you, just on a different level, which brings me to a thought. Let's talk about some of the benefits of open-mindedness. Okay. What are the benefits?
I think there's countless, but I think if we're going to organize them for our listeners, expanding your mind and learning new perspectives. And what we've learned is that people high in openness are more likely to experience the world differently to the average person as a result of their breadth, their depth, and permeability of consciousness, and reoccurrent need to enlarge and examine an experience. And that is a quote taken directly from the Journal of Research of Personality. And so again, what I'm talking about is, and what I'm experiencing myself and in the self-smarter journey that we're on in this particular topic, is in order to expand your mind, you have to be conscious of when you're in a position to be able to do that, or when you may just unconsciously not have, just blocking that out. Like, that makes me uncomfortable, or that's not something I'm used to, or I only like this kind of music. Like when you decide to turn on 90s rap music,
the best.
Have
the
learned,
best, by the way.
I have learned to have a more open mind. Do your preference for music? No, I joke. But seriously, I think a benefit of open-mindedness is you're just learning. And for people listening to this podcast, wherever you are, if you're committed to our episodes, that's such an essential part of what we're trying to talk about here. And it is required of leadership in all aspects is to have an open mind. And so I think that's one of the benefits, obviously igniting creativity and intelligence. One of the reasons I decided to, come to New York is because I felt like I needed, at this stage of my career and my personal life, I needed some creativity, and I needed a new version of that. And where else could I find that? I mean, I think I chose a pretty darn good place to do that. And a study, and I know you put some research in here, which I think is very helpful for our listeners. And, a psychological study was recently conducted that revealed that open-minded people may live in a completely different reality. They find that openness and mood can affect how you visually perceive the world, which can affect creativity. And, according to the research also, is that open-mindedness and cognitively complex individuals are less swayed by singular events and are more resistant to suggestion and manipulation. And when you put that in there, and I was, prepping for the episode, I thought of the media. And I'll tell you that I have very rarely, I don't know that I've even turned on a news outlet since I've been in New York. For a number of reasons, but it's mainly because I'm outside all of the time. I'm constantly, do I listen to the news? Do I want to stay informed? Of course. But what I started to realize is the less I was tied to, media outlets, because I was constantly going back and forth, because I really appreciate different viewpoints when it comes to media and what I'm being told. And I really see a difference. I see a difference in the way that I choose to find information. And so I think that that's been extremely helpful. So open-mindedness, again, to reiterate that, it helps us with creativity, which is, easily, but also intelligence, because it forces us not to just be fed something. Open-mindedness.
Manipulation.
That's right. Manipulation, just to be, okay, that was said and, oh, that's on TV, so it must be
true.
The truth.
That's right.
Excuse me. No. But however, what I found was I was being a bit lazy. And so open-mindedness is, again, it's choosing to hear other opinions and to hear other perspectives. So I think another benefit, and again, this kind of ties in, is, helping to manage your mood. And according to research from the University of Pennsylvania, open-minded individuals are better able to predict how others will behave and are less prone to projection, which I think also ties into the previous point that I was trying to make. And also, I think one of the benefits is helping your perception of the world. And people with a narrow perspective are more interested in proving themselves right than getting the best outcome. They often focus much more on being understood than understanding others. And when again, I think and this ties into politics, of course, but it also ties into understanding how other people have been shaped and, what their beliefs are. And, this is central to, I hope that most of our leaders or our listeners and leaders, of course, you're listening, you deem yourself a leader wherever you're leading, is that understanding how others are shaped and accepting that before we try to move them towards our own beliefs. I think that's a big part of what we're skipping today as we interact and we connect with other people, is we're failing to truly understand their belief systems. And how do you do that? Well, thoughtful questioning, listening, and just attempting to, again, just show up with a genuine desire to understand more versus showing up to be understood. That's, to me, where the nuance between the two comes in.
I just have a quick example of this that I love that actually impacted me in my mid-20s when I moved to Dallas. But where I lived in Plano, there was a mosque, a Catholic church, and a Jewish temple all within 4 corners. So they took up 3 corners of a main intersection in Dallas or Plano. And I would attend the Catholic church, not obviously, but that's what I did. And at one point during one of the sermon parts of our mass, the priest said, "I highly encourage you all to pay visit to our brothers and sisters across the street at the mosque and across the street at the temple." And everyone was kind of looking at each other like that was an odd thing to say. But then he went on to say, we often do this with parishioners here. They will host us, other places of worship will host us and teach. And we do the exact same thing. And in that moment, I realized how potentially, even being married to a Jewish person, how potentially closed-minded I had been about the notion of, oh my gosh, I knew the temple was there. Yeah. I knew the mosque was there. Why did I not think to go knock on the door and then, ask for a tour, or what is this about, or talk to me about how you pray? Expose yourself to the world, expose yourself to other people, and open your mind so that we can all potentially get along better. And he ended it by saying, when we do this, we understand one another so we don't fear them anymore.
That's right. I mean, understanding, open-mindedness really can be a significant source of comfort. When you just understand it, it doesn't mean that you have to believe or you have to adopt every belief that someone else has had. But when you understand it's somewhat more than what you did. And I think what you were describing was a beautiful example of curiosity. And so open-mindedness does not exist without genuine curiosity. And I find myself to be someone, and I've spoke a lot about it on this podcast. And if you know me, I'm just genuinely a curious person. And that's been a superpower of mine that I didn't realize was a superpower. And however, I've had to become a lot more curious here to understand why things are the way, or why something's happening, or why people are doing certain things. And so I love that example of just, you being encouraged to be more curious about other religions, so that honestly, you could appreciate yours and theirs, and there can be a common, because you are neighbors.
That's
You're
right.
living in the same place.
That's right.
And I applaud your, what do you call them? Priests? Are they priests in Catholic Church? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not Catholic. I bet I wasn't raised that way. And okay, so I just applaud that. I think that that's beautiful. I think we need to do that more in our schools. I think we need to do that in so many different walks of our life. Do it more because, I think the ultimate benefit to open-mindedness is satisfaction, like emotionally, and quite frankly, if our emotional health is being improved, then we know that our physical health is being improved. So that's why I've encouraged this episode. And it seems like a simple notion, open-minded. And I'm sure most of you who are listening, you probably consider yourself fairly open-minded, as did and Meg and I do. But I think when seasons of life come along, now this could be, Meg, you're going through your beautiful son, who I adore, just turned 16 this week.
Yes.
So by the time this episode airs, he'll be 16 for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Pulling out some of your hair. You're going to have to be really open-minded.
Yes.
Something clicks at 16. And having lived through it, I'm having to be very open-minded, having a beautiful adult daughter. And so open-mindedness really is benefiting us in so many ways, certainly as in our personal lives, but in professional lives too, because how can you effectively lead someone or be led if you truly are not open-minded?
That's right.
And so while we may deem ourselves open-minded in certain ways, I can promise you, just someone sitting in a 50-year-old seat, there's always a time to be more open-minded. So that's why I want to talk about it.
I love this quote too that we pulled. Do you want to read it? This quote?
Sure.
I think it just kind of summarizes everything that you just said, and I appreciated it.
Yeah. So Scott Fitzgerald once said, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function."
So what you
and
were
I
talking
love
about,
that quote. And Brene talks about it in Atlas of the Heart as well. This ability to hold two beliefs. You don't necessarily have to adopt them both, but to be able to hold them and not fall apart.
That's right.
Be able to accept
right.
that there are multiple ways to see a situation and to understand it. Now, you get facts and science, those examples, and I'm sure, I have some folks that are listening now going, but wait a minute, Danelle, science is science or facts are facts. I'm not suggesting that that's where open-mindedness necessarily can benefit us the most, but in most situations, as we're relating to other people, there are more opportunities to be able to, as he talks about, hold two opposed ideas at the same time and still be able to function and not, cut people off or whatever the extreme action is when you are closed-minded, what you do.
Right.
So.
Just to be right. Right. And we had another episode on that. I can't recall the number, but
we were going to work on that.
We were, but
man, we've had some turkey and some wine since then. Mm-hmm.
We have, but we did another episode on that, why we have to be right. We talked a lot about being right. And all of this is kind of coming to fruition for me, at least our full circle, because I'm thinking, I asked a lot of people last week in just testing this theory. I was like, do you think you're open-minded? And if I thought that they were or they weren't, I obviously, because I hate conflict, I didn't say anything. Like, I wasn't like, well, I actually think you're very close-minded. But
you were asking people at Thanksgiving about their open-mindedness?
All week.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Oh. I had there was a Friendsgiving I attended. There was a family Thanksgiving I attended. And then there were other gatherings.
You may need to come to New York next year for Thanksgiving because you might not get invited back, but okay.
Well, I was like, how do we feel about open-mindedness? Do we feel like we're open-minded? Are you open-minded? Like that.
Did anybody say no?
No. Everyone said yes.
I can't imagine ever meeting anyone who would say no.
Right.
I mean, it would be like, oh no, I'm so close-minded.
But then I would say, are there some things that you are?
Oh,
but yeah, yes, yes. Most of the time people don't want to say they're closed-minded. about
who
certain
does?
things.
Right.
But it's the truth. We're going to be open-minded and closed-minded. The question is are we in awareness of any given situation? And am I being open-minded in that moment?
Right.
That's when it matters, right? So to get into the definition, we usually talk about definitions at the top of our podcast. We didn't do that today, and we did it on purpose because there are different definitions. I have a definition, and then there's one in here that Danelle's going to read. The definition that I found that I loved was open-mindedness is the willingness to search actively for evidence against one's favored beliefs, plans, or goals, and to weigh such evidence fairly when it is available. Weigh such evidence fairly when it is available. So take what you know, use it, and take in other people's information. Use that data to make a decision. I love that. Loved it. What was
I like it too, because it's like, it's really calling us all out to say, search actively for evidence against one's favored belief. That to me is the magic of that particular definition, is that to consciously search for an opposing thought. I think if we could do that, more of that, we would have such healthier relationships in general, and harmony, workplace, personal, you name it. If we would actively search against.
World peace.
I think the word against maybe could throw some folks off, but just indifference, looking for difference of opinion or beliefs would be helpful.
Totally.
So another simplistic definition from Merriam-Webster is open-mindedness is open to arguments or idea and not prejudice.
Prejudice meaning I'm bringing my prejudice of what I believe and know to the conversation or thought and making you try to think that way.
Yeah, I think the way I took it is that I'm going to have what I believe, but I'm going to be not prejudiced against what you believe.
Got it.
I'm inviting that.
I love it.
And so I think that's, again, it's a little bit of a nuance between the two definitions, but I think together they give us really good context as to how we can specifically define open-mindedness.
Mm-hmm. What about exercises or methods that people can practice? I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is where how do we walk away from this conversation with tools in the toolbox to where, especially during the holidays, if you live in a family like mine that's completely polarized, what should I be doing in those moments to make sense and be more open-minded with what I have to say?
Yeah, I think, again, I don't know that this is this list is very opinion-based, and what we are finding in our current journey towards being self-smarter and more open-minded. So we, again, I'm sure there's our incredible listeners out there have things that they could add to this. But what I would say is, we have to challenge ourselves. I think we would start with that. And I don't know, select a topic that you're emotionally charged about. Clearly, you've mentioned being polarized a couple of times, and I know your family well enough to know that a lot of that is around politics. And I understand that to be true for you. And, maybe that those topics kind of chap you, put you in that spot. And so what I would recommend is, challenge yourself by honestly seeking to understand why it is that they believe, and asking those questions. And that doesn't mean that you keep the conversation going or you try to give them an opposing thought right then and there. But maybe in this holiday, you just ask some questions and then just thank them. Say, thank you for telling me that, or thank you for helping me understand why you believe that.
Yeah.
And then if they say, well, because I heard it on XYZ news station, then definitely drop the topic and run. No, I'm just kidding.
Grab another bottle.
Run for the punch.
Yeah. Get another bottle of wine, and we're having a cocktail. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. FaceTime me real quick, because I got to call Danelle. We have an important meeting. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
Anyway, I think that I really think we have to challenge ourselves, and sometimes in pursuit of finding an opposing thought to what we believe or what we can find ourselves being closed-minded about. Sometimes we feel like we need to react in that moment, and we don't. Just ask the question and sit in it. and then maybe follow up, or then maybe come back to it. But for what I'm learning to do is to be grateful when someone can't articulate why they believe or why they have an opinion. And this could be something simplistic, or it can be something a lot more in depth, like politics, to where things run really deep. But this can happen in just almost surfacey things. Like, why do you prefer, I don't know, the color purple over the color green? I think practicing open-mindedness can start with simple things. I think practicing open-mindedness could be, if you are conscious that you're going through a relationship change with someone, whether it's in the workplace, maybe someone's getting promoted, or maybe they're in a position that you want to be in, and you want to learn more about that. I think it's challenging yourself to think consciously about that. We've mentioned we're in transition with relationships with your teenage son now, and fully teenage son, and my adult daughter, being conscious about that. You and I've had to work on that as well, me being here and me not being in the Dallas office. And so again, I think it starts with us.
Right.
Like most things that we talk about on this podcast, we got to take a good hard look in the mirror if we want things to develop better on behalf of ourselves, and certainly on behalf of improve things for others. So I think the other, and we've mentioned this, but it certainly needs to be reiterated, is stay curious, and not in a passive way, but in a very active way. And I clearly just described that too earlier. And so actively listening to someone and trying to find ways to, talk about, it's interesting. I've been meeting so many new people, and I've been talking to people from all walks of life. And I was having a conversation she's executive, and she'd listened to the podcast once or twice. And she said, "I've noticed something about you." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "You have a very interesting way of asking questions." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "I've noticed that you have incredible ability to ask the next question." And so, we've talked about that on here, is like the follow-up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and she's like, "You seem to have a way in being able to do that." And I go, "Well, it's interesting, because I used to not. I would hear what you had to say. I would ask the first question, because I was, I'm naturally curious and extroverted and a 7 on the Enneagram. So being the first to ask a question is not a problem for me. But then I would start talking. And so I've worked on Tell Me More, which we learned from Brene Brown. And I've worked on just really listening to what someone has to say and picking one or two things from whatever they're describing and asking another question. And I appreciated that, because I've only met this person like 2 or 3 times. And so I appreciated that she recognized that. And she said, and I've heard you talk about it, and in the few episodes I've listened to on your podcast. And she's like, "I can see that. I can see that you've worked on that." And I was like, "Yeah, that's not how I was naturally wired to be." Mm-hmm. And I've had to learn that. And so anyway, again, staying curious.
I have an observation too that I'd like to share, because it's almost next level behavior here with open-mindedness that I have observed you do, which is it combines the first thing, which is challenge yourself, and the second thing that you just said, stay curious. Because what I've observed you do, and I've learned how to do it and practice it in my own life, is you may be listening to someone speak, or 2 people speak, or a group of people speak. I feel like you gather the data, you have your opinion, but your opinion becomes less important in that moment, because what you're trying to do is help others express the why. So what you'll do is you'll say, I've never told you this, by the way.
No, this is like not on the script.
I know. But what you'll say is, in your curiosity, you are coming at it from a curiosity perspective for someone at the table who's making a face and not understanding. So you'll probe the person who's explaining a little bit further with good questions to help the person, let's say on the right or the left of the table, on the right of the table, understand the person on the left of the side of the table. So you almost end up being like a moderator, because you think this way, and because you've trained yourself to think this way. You now know how to help moderate and mitigate more effective communication, really, by understanding where the motives are coming from. I know that's deep, but you have figured out a way how to challenge yourself, keep calm, understand what you understand, but also try to bridge.
Right. And I appreciate that. Thank you. And you know what that came from? Well, it came from a lot of things. Obviously, a 26% approval rating in communication is what I was not great at. But I learned that it wasn't just what I was saying, it was what I was not saying and what I was not giving other people the opportunity to say. And so one of the things that I learned about myself, and I would be frustrated, is I was like, I said that in the meeting, and you were like, Danelle, they didn't pick. I know you said it, and I think 3 of us understood it, but the rest, the other 15 did not understand what you were saying. And I was like, really? I mean, because I don't find my words to be that complex, or what I say to be that difficult to digest. However, if it's the first time you're talking about something, especially and now I'm definitely referencing business settings, that our job as leaders are to be the best and the most effective communicators. And I've said this also before, our role, especially as we move into more responsibility, is the way I like to look at things, not necessarily move up in the ranks. I can't stand that stuff. But we are chief repeat officers. And so what I learned for myself was that I wasn't repeating things or saying the same thing in different ways, so that different mindsets could, and when we think about the Enneagram, that's a perfect example, is like people hear things in different ways. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I don't have to go too deep on it, but I believe that I became what you described, decent at doing that because I needed to do it myself. And so my role, because I've made a decision a long time ago, is I want to be the type of leader that makes other people a better version of themselves, is that was something I needed to learn. And once I learned it, then I was like, okay, I can help a conversation. I can help, this room of 3 people or this room of 20 people, or even a larger audience sometimes, by just helping with the follow-up question and the next thing. So it's a combination of genuine curiosity and active listening that can, again, help us open our minds. And that's what we're trying to do, is because a lot of times in the way you described it, and what the listeners may not understand, is in our environment, we're a marketing agency. So creatively, sometimes we're speaking and we're coming up with ideas. And I mean, half the room, their eyes are lit up and they're almost doing, cheers. And the other half of the room are completely lost.
Left behind,
Left behind, like, what in the hell are they talking about? And that would happen a lot when I would speak. So my ideas are out there at times. And so I think it was that experience myself that led me to want to be more helpful when there's a gathering of people having a conversation about whatever it may be. Yeah. And so, part of it too comes from just being a natural pleaser. Like I want there to be a positive outcome when we come together. So anyway, I think that those 2 things, I think staying calm is extremely important. And there's a quote here from UC Davis that says, one of the fastest ways to close your mind is to freak out.
I love it. It's so California. UC Davis.
It's interesting, and so the person who said this is that he suggests taking a deep breath and finding calm to help fight feelings of defensiveness and annoyance that might pop up when you find something that doesn't quite match how you see the world. And it's so interesting because, we have, I have a friend right now, and she's, I'm learning a lot. She's an 8 on the Enneagram. I'm learning a lot from her right now. And what I'm learning is that, and we can see this, I have a daughter who is a 2 on the Enneagram. She can get to tears, and she's an actor. She can get to tears in a heartbeat. I'm one of those odd characters that personally, I can't get to tears quick. You see a picture of a dog. I mean, I was crying in Williams-Sonoma. I promise y'all, I'm still in grieving over
Yes.
Shelby Ray, our fur baby that we lost in June. And I see a dog and like, I just touch him and I just start crying. And so then the poor people randomly on the streets of New York or in the stores, I just was like, can I just have a moment with your animal? And so that will bring me to tears. But what I'm learning from my friend who's an 8 on the Enneagram, I mean, tears are just not there at all. So if you're in a situation in a work environment or in a personal environment and someone goes to tears immediately, that freaks me out a bit. And so I would have to practice what we're talking about here is I'd have to stay calm.
Right.
And I would have to let them feel that. And it reminds me of a Brandi Carlile song where she says, and we'll put a link to it, it's one of my favorite songs of hers, but it's okay to cry. But I naturally want them to stop crying. And then for my friends, including Mackenzie and Hannah, I want them to start crying. I'm like, at some point, could you show some more emotion? So it's just interesting when you start to really pay attention to these dynamics. And so I went off on a rabbit trail there, but I think, learning to stay calm in all the different scenarios, and clear the obvious is here is when somebody says something that you just completely can't understand or that is appalling to you.
Right.
Remember to check yourself before you lash out and or try to change the moment that they're in. Right. Try to understand it and maybe help them see that it's okay or whatever that may be. But yeah, I think calmness is something that, I've had to learn certainly in the workplace, but definitely in my personal life for sure.
What else? Is there another tip?
Yeah, I think, we're doing it here is surround yourself with other people who seek to be open-minded. Again, you're not going to ask very few people that you ask, are you open-minded? Are they going to say no? It's when you get to that next question, well, is there anything that you're closed-minded about when you really get the good stuff? But I think it's what we're doing here on this podcast. And the reason why we're doing it is we want to surround ourselves with people who seek to be self-smarter in a lot of different ways, but certainly as it relates to open-mindedness. And it's why I've chosen to be pretty vocal and vulnerable about the journey I'm on in multiple ways. And you've been right alongside me in that journey. And that's what I've been really enjoying about our guest in the previous 3 episodes is their vulnerability to talk about when they weren't so open-minded and how they had to choose open-mindedness and vulnerable, opportunities in order to grow. And those, again, both Michelle and Adria, our guests, and I'm so looking forward to our guests in the future, but those 2 are perfect examples of open-mindedness and that they had to use that skill and they had to adopt it in order to get where they are. So I think, again, surrounding yourself with open-minded people is a great place to start, and observing when they are and potentially when they're not.
My hope for people who are listening to this, because I'm absorbing all of this as if I'm hearing it for the first time, even after all the research and whatnot. But what I'm thinking is, are you resonating with this, leaders and listeners? Are you thinking, I see myself in that. I see, and I'm aware that I have a lack of curiosity, or I'm good at it. To Danelle's point, that's my superpower. Are you able to stay calm whenever things are seemingly being discussed that you have a conflict or you tend to be closed-minded about? Identify that. Are you aware of those things? It's all about you. And it's all about this deeper awareness of yourself and how you're behaving in any circumstance relative to open-mindedness. Where do you sit, listener?
Yeah, and I think open-mindedness is just such an interesting thing. And I like the idea of challenging ourselves to write down things we're not open-minded about. Now, I'm going to give a very shallow, I'm gonna be very vulnerable here and give you a shallow example of me being closed-minded.
Oh boy, buckle up, guys.
Listen.
Yep. Okay.
Well, it's something that bothers you.
Oh, okay.
And I've listened to you through the years, but I've never been a fan of Indian food.
Okay.
And the reason why is because my only exposure has been to one particular taste. Yellow curry is not something that I enjoy.
Right.
Was the one time I had it, was it prepared well? Was it I don't know. I don't remember. I just know that the time I had it, I didn't like it. Well, here I am, in the food mecca of, one of the food meccas of the world.
Yes.
I have decided that I'm going to be more open-minded. I'm going to learn to like some Indian food. And, Hannah on our team, I mean, everything she's ever brought in, she makes amazing food, and it's great. But I don't know how to order things on menu. So I just stay away from that particular type of food. And, you've told me for years that some of the best food, Indian food you ever had was in London. Well, I had a friend say that the other day, and I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? So I'm just I've been asking people, where's the best place to eat Indian food? And people are sending me.
Let's go. Let's
just
go next
sending
week.
me. Well, you may have a little surprise waiting on you, and
Okay.
we're just going to order. And if I don't particularly like 2 or 3 of the things, fine.
That's
but
right.
I want to open my mind to that. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but I just think it's like people who are like, oh, I hate Brussels sprouts. Well, tell me how you've had them.
Right. Are you eating them in the can or? Right.
Yeah, I've had a can or frozen. I'm like, well, there's so
might
many
try
different
fresh.
ways to have Brussels sprouts. And so I think, again, it's starting with simple things, because when we start to work on the more, doesn't matter. It's not going to make me a less of a person because I'm not trying Indian food. But if I'm someone who wants to care
Right.
and wants to be more open-minded, and I'm in a place where I'm certain there are fabulous places to eat Indian food in New York City. And so it's just an example, just an easy example.
I love it. Love it. Let's go have Indian food now.
We are.
Awesome. Any final comments about open-mindedness before we move on to music?
No, I just appreciate you like helping to shape this episode kind of with a loose topic. It's just something that I feel passionate about because I'm in it, and I'm finding myself being making the decision to be more open-minded, to be here and to make the most of this experience. So I think it's something that we can definitely all use more of.
Agreed. All right. So for our music moment, I have a topic that we have not discussed. And so I think this will be fun because we'll be hearing this for the first time from each other, because we have not even talked about this, but this has been a whole thing here in the office. It was a big topic of discussion at Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And that is, and I have a feeling you've probably heard about it, the Taylor Swift tickets situation.
Oh, no.
You haven't heard anything. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So
fun.
what happened was they sold out so fast. So what happened was, and we have a lot of Taylor Swifties. Is that what they're called?
I think so.
Here in the office. Mm-hmm. Jessie is one of them.
Jessie's our lead
Swiftie.
That's what they're called. And she'll be appalled if we got that wrong. Sorry, Jess, if we did, but I think that's what they're called.
Sorry, Desi. I think Jordan's kind of like along for the ride, but not like a crazy.
No. She's like Mackie Payton. They I don't know. They weren't on the Taylor Swift, but they've come along.
Okay. We have someone named Hallie Caroline, a young lady who works here who is also a major Swiftie. Alicia is a major Swiftie. So this conversation's been going on for weeks in this office. Okay. I haven't even told you.
Wow, man, I missed that.
Yes. Well, what happened is, I guess people got like a lottery situation where you either got a code or you didn't. Mm-hmm. Okay. You signed up through the Taylor Swift
portal
fan club. Yeah. Fan club. And you either got a code to get access to tickets as they released or you did not. Well, guess who did not get the code?
Jessie.
Yes.
No. And everybody else did?
Everybody else did.
I'll be damned. Oh, well, I'm going to buy a bootleg ticket.
So I was tempted to contact Mackie to be like, did you get the code? Because if you did and you get the tickets, just buy extra and then you can parse it out. We can sell them. You know what I mean? Like I was going to get into this.
Oh yeah. We'll be able to buy them for a hefty price, I'm sure.
Well, my niece, Avery, she got the code. She said at Thanksgiving, she sat, and I know this happened with Hallie Caroline and Alicia, other people in the office. They sat there and it just, when the moment they could get on, it crashed. So many people in the world, but in the United States, crashed the Ticketmaster website. So people were on there for hours, and it was probably the bots. But all that to say, I think Taylor Swift is probably not very happy with it because so many of her fans are
No, she's so fan
disappointed.
forward.
I know.
And she does not like to disappoint her fans.
I know.
And that is major.
I know. And so there's a lot of banter going on around it. There's a lot of, I mean, everybody still loves her. Obviously, I think one of her songs is in the top 4, right? Top 10. I think it's like at 4 right now and on the charts from that new album. But she is just beside herself because of the trouble that everyone's had just to get tickets to go see her. But they are sold out, Danelle. You cannot buy a damn ticket, or at least an affordable ticket. So it's just a big hullabaloo. It's just a big
And it'll be
deal.
interesting. It'll be interesting to see how she handles it. And I'll have to say that's one of the things I've always admired her is how she's handled her PR crisis. And she's done that a number of ways. And when I love it when she writes a song about it. Like that's one of my favorites. And I was neutral on Taylor Swift in terms of her music because I was introduced when she was kind of going, well, first of all, I loved her when she first came on the scene because she was country and the 16-year-old was writing the most prolific, easy to understand, but still very deep lyrics as a 16-year-old. So I loved her then. And then she went to this kind of pop phase. And then I really came back, and we've talked about it on this podcast, really came back to respect her and have immense just admiration for her with Folklore and Evermore, the 2 albums that she essentially wrote during COVID and definitely released them. This new album, I'm struggling a little with. I text Jesse the morning it came out. I listened to the whole thing. I said, I'm going to give it some more time on my walks. But I will say that watching her, and it's fun to go back and listen to her music. And I'm doing it because as she's taking the rights back to her music by re-releasing some of her former albums, it's just interesting to hear she writes about these struggles, and she writes about, how she was picked on by the media and called out by Kanye or whatever. Yeah, it was Kanye, right?
Yes.
They called her. Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's just interesting how artists deal with these massive things that they can't control.
Right.
Like Taylor Swift couldn't control. Now she made the decision to allow her tickets to be sold in that particular way. I'm guessing she had a decision
like a monopoly, that Ticketmaster and somebody else. That's it.
That's it. Yeah. So she probably had some control, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And to know that it didn't work in her fan favorites, but I have no doubt she'll do some epic show or something that we can all enjoy. I don't know. I think, she'll come up with something, but yeah, thank you for telling me about that. Maybe Jessie was waiting to tell me in person, but she hadn't let me know of the hullabaloo
She's
quite
had
yet.
An awesome attitude about it. I will say that.
Well, when you love your artists, that their hearts, they've never choose to be in that predicament. So good. Anyway, thanks for sharing. And I hope all the Swifties out there get a chance to see the incredible artist that she is. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
All right. Well, it was great to be back in the saddle today and great to chat with you, Danelle, and see you while you're in New York. And I'll see you next week.
Yay. I'm so excited to have you back. It's getting cold here, so bundle
Bring a jacket.
up.
Okay. And
No,
jackets. A coat. I'm on the layer. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, there are links in the show notes that you may find helpful, which is what we hope. And until next week, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandi Carlile reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.